So I just wanted to put my opinion out there, as insignificant as it may be. But upon hearing that the Chinese government hid the fact that they knew certain aspects of the coronavirus outbreak, particularly about the asymptomatic cases, and by purposefully keeping that information from the rest of the world, furthered the spread, the speed in which it would spread, and also setting back the ability to come up with a viable treatment, vaccine. And I know a lot of people are probably angry, and this could lead to a lot of heat on China from the rest of the world. I not only see it as smart, and I see it as probably being a good move from their perspective. I see the point, and I know a lot of people are mad at China, but I don't think I can be. For one, them knowing that much right out of the box would have almost immediately pointed the finger at them for having started it, which they were trying to avoid. And rightfully so. We would have done the same thing. I know we like to act like we're moralists in this country, but, who are we kidding? But also from the Chinese perspective, them and India together, being the most populated part of the entire planet, they've got people to spare. What is it, like 30 million, 40 million young men of fighting age? If they ever wanted to just start their own draft and militarize their nation, they could just conquer the entire world if they wanted to. I don't really think that's in the Chinese nature as a people, but we like to see them as imperialist, and I think they are to their own merit in the way that we are, that if they can do it in a way that is competitive on an even playing field, they're not looking just to conquer and take over, but they do so through their own guile, their own ingenuity, through capitalism. And so be it, because capitalism should be a fair game. We love to tout capitalism in America when it works in our favor, and when it works against us, we cry like babies. So why I kind of agree with the move is they're culling off their society. They're getting rid of the weak. They kept themselves silent about it, knowing that all these people would flee, go to all these other countries, spread it, and they're kind of doing everybody a favor when you think about it. They're culling the weak, the old, the sick, and in the long run, while it's a pretty bad hit on the medical industry, in the long run, they'll be freeing up a lot, Social Security. They'll, just cutting the fat, if you will. And I know that's cold to say, and everyone likes to act like they care. Like I said, we're such moralists in this country, but that's bullshit. Where I work, I deal with people, and I have to listen to people all the time go on about the wants, needs, things that don't really matter. We're a very selfish people because we're human. All humans really are. I think in America we're a little bit more so because we're used to getting things our way. Which leads me to the older generations. As much as I love my parents, but the boomer generation, they're also called the vampire generation. People a little bit older than my parents, because they've always gotten the better hand of everything, because when they were around voting and bills were being passed, laws were being passed, they were always in their favor for the most part. And we've seen how they've profited. They own homes and boats, and they get to go out and do all this great stuff. Meanwhile, my generation, the younger generation, it's just getting worse and worse. And even with good jobs, it's hard to pay bills and lead a comparable lifestyle to that of the boomer generation. And while I don't want to see them all get killed off, I don't think that's necessarily a good thing, but at the same time, I don't really see them ever really caring about us, because it's comparable, if I could use an analogy, to the big tree in the woods. And say the big tree was there in the very beginning. He was the only tree, and he sucked all the good fertile out of the ground. And then when the young saplings fell down and started growing, and the soil wasn't as nutrient rich because the good tree, the big tree, the old tree, it took it all. And then the old tree looks down at all the little trees and goes, why don't you guys grow faster? You know, when I was your age, I grew twice as fast. You know, because they don't have the same starting line as the big tree. And that's kind of where we are, is we're living with laws and bills that were basically put in place to profit them, their generation, and they knew that they were kicking all the debt can, you know, just down the road for the younger generations to pay. At the same time, however, I see that we are doing that with the Corona bill, you know, all the debt relief and you know, the Trump money, people call it. We're basically just kicking that can down the road. You know, oh, $2 million to the people, which is really $6 million, because we're giving what, like $60 billion to the Fed, who then trades on it at a inflationary rate of 10 times what it's worth. So it's $6 trillion, and I think out of the $2 trillion, 12% of that went to the actual people. A large chunk goes to the hospitals. Most of it goes to the corporations, the big businesses. You know, because God forbid they have enough money to ride out that it got slow for 2 or 3 weeks. And I can tell you right now that the corporations are making crazy money off of this crisis. A lot of them are. The mom and pops are suffering the most, but you know, even now, it's been like a month maybe, and it's business as usual. It's booming. Everyone's out. I'm driving down the road right now, and there's just as much traffic as any other day. You know, and a lot of people might have been screwed over, but ultimately not really. Like, people lost their jobs, and now people are making anywhere from $900 to $1,200, $1,300 a week. Someone like me, I didn't get Trump money, and I still work. I'm considered essential, which I don't think I am, but okay. So I don't get unemployment, but my hours got cut, so I make less money. And so it kind of put me into a spot where I could barely pay my bills. And you know, I'm not getting a bonus for being essential. I'm not getting any sort of reward. I didn't get Trump money. I don't get this unemployment bonus. I don't get any of it. All I got were cut hours and to do more work because we got cut to a skeleton crew. And that's not even the job I work at. That's not even their fault. A lot of people were like, oh, Corona, gonna stay home. And okay, that's fine. And a lot of it was that it did slow down for a couple weeks and it looked really bad. So they had to cut hours. And I was glad to have what hours I was getting. It wasn't as much, like I said, it was a real struggle. But now it's back up to normal, and I'm happier with that. But at the end of the day, you know, I just think a lot of people made out like bandits out of this whole thing. And they don't realize that that money, it all came from debt. You know, the Fed just printed it off, gave it to us. We now owe them. We'll have to pay it in interest, and that interest will be paid over the next 20, 30 years by our children. And if they do more stimulus bills, then that's going to be paid off by their children. It's just going to go on and on. And our debt rate is getting pretty high. It's not non-recoverable, but it's definitely to the point where we're barely a first world country anymore. It's insane. So China, to lead to my original point, by what they did, you know, a lot of people might die off. But if we're honest with ourselves and we stop acting all high and mighty, like, oh, but we're good Americans who care about the world, because you fucking don't. All you care about is sending your... Well, our military is what procures cheap oil, you know. It's not Exxon. Exxon doesn't go to all these countries or off the shores of these islands and procure oil with tankers. They just land up and go, okay, we're Exxon, we're here, we're taking it. No, our military does it. And we all stand by idly and we watch it happen. Either you know it happens or you don't. And either way, you don't fucking care, as long as your car runs and it's cheap. So, whatever. But, you know, a lot of people might die off and they're weak and they're sick, and then that's eventually in the long run, it's gonna help our medical field. It's gonna free up a lot of space, free up a lot of Social Security, and eventually that'll create a lot of wealth. So, you you know, it's kind of a double-edged sword depending on how you look at it, whatever. But I'm not crying any fucking tears about it. And I see why China did it. You know, if anything, it's kind of like a controlled burn. You know, the woods get too cluttered and you don't want the whole valley to go up in flames, so you let off controlled burns. And that keeps the woods manageable, and it ensures that there won't be a huge forest fire that takes out the whole valley or towns. You know, that's basically what it is. That's what happened. And it was smart. And, you know, to say our government had no idea, I mean, come on. I mean, we're all finding out about it. So you think our government just found out about it too? I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, we're talking about a government that has technology, holds on to it for 30 years, and then one day we get to know about it. I mean, and that's not conspiracy. It's just, you know. But that's pretty much it. I just wanted to say that, you know, going around blaming China for what they did, I think there's a different way of looking at this. I think that there's definitely a silver lining to the cloud. You know, our economy will survive, and it will survive because of all of the culling of the weak. And, you know, sad as it is, that's just the way it is. I mean, our society is basically a bunch of fat people who overeat, and we have to spend 3-4 times as much on their medical care by the time they're 40, as opposed to people who actually exercise, eat healthy, go out, work, pay taxes, don't use the doctor that much, and in the end, when they're like 75 and they actually need a medical care, it's barely what it should be. Because we're spending it on all the unhealthy, drug-abusing, fat, overeating pieces of shit in this world. And fuck them.